Welcome to this video lecture on the subject transmission lines and antennas. So in this lecture we are going to discuss about loading of transmission lines. So whether a practical transmission line will satisfy the distortionless condition. So for example, underground telephone cable, so it is practically it is impossible for a distortionless condition. There are some distortion present, so we have to avoid the distortion using the loading technique. So what is a loading? So loading of transmission lines is used to achieve a distortionless condition in practical transmission lines. So it is impossible to make the practical transmission line as distortionless, but we can minimize the distortion. So in case of coaxial cables, microstrip lines and two wire lines, and condition for a distortionless transmission line. So what is the condition? It is R by L equal to G by C. So we can reduce the resistance. So reduce R by L to the same values as G by C, but this requires large conductors. So and reduce C requires an increase in the spacing between conductors, but cable size and cost is increased. So increase G increases the leakage loss and it is undesirable. So the effective way is inductance L to be increased. So loading and loaded lines. So to achieve the above condition, the series inductance could be increased by inserting a artificial inductance in series with the line. So this process is known as the loading, and such lines are called as loaded lines. So for example, it is a copper core conductor and the loading is used here. And loading is mainly done on telephone cables carrying voice signals. So types of loading are continuous loading, lumped loading and patch loading. What is continuous loading? It is inductance of the line is increased uniformly along the length of the line. A type of iron or some other high permeability magnetic material in the form of a wire or tape is wound around the copper conductors. This will increase the permeability of the surrounding medium, which in turn increases the inductance of the line. Advantages and disadvantages of continuous loading. The attenuation is constant over the wide frequency range and it is used only in submarine cables. Some disadvantages are it is very expensive and possibility of transmission delays, and eddy current and hysteresis losses increases with frequency, thus increasing the value of resistance. Lumped loading. The inductance coils are wound on a toroidal core and inserted periodically in series with the line. So this type of core produces the coil of small dimension, high inductance and low eddy current losses. So this is called as the lumped loading. So advantages are large value of inductance is possible with reduced attenuation. Method of loading is more convenient and eddy current and hysteresis losses are very less. Next is patch loading. It employs sections of a continuous loaded cable separated by the sections of unloaded cable. So for example, in submarine cables, patch loading is adequate to obtain the required reduction in attenuation. So advantages of patch loading are cost is greatly reduced. So here the reduction in attenuation and the effect of loading on secondary constants. So we have discussed the secondary constants previously. Those are characteristic impedance of the line and propagation constant. So propagation constant describes the properties of the waves when it is traveling through a medium. So these are the very important parameters. So here due to effect of loading, the characteristic impedance increases, and in case of propagation constant, alpha is attenuation constant. So attenuation constant is reduced because of loading, and phase constant is increased, phase velocity is reduced. Let's take assessment. So define loading and loaded lines and name the types of loading. List the disadvantages of continuous loading. What are the advantages of lumped loading and what are the effects of loading on the secondary constants. So define loading. Actually, loading of a transmission line is used to achieve the distortion-less condition. It is used to minimize the distortion present in the transmission line. For the loading purpose, we are going to introduce some artificial inductance in series with the line. And in second question, types of loading. So we have discussed three types. It is continuous loading, lumped loading, and patch loading. And disadvantages of continuous loading are it is very expensive and possibility of transmission delays and losses occurs. And what are the advantages of lumped loading? So lumped loading gives very accurate, that is with reduced attenuation, and also it is very convenient, and losses are less in case of eddy current losses, and hysteresis losses are very less. And what are the effects of loading on secondary constants? So we have discussed the secondary constants like attenuation. So attenuation constant is reduced and phase constant is increased. So these are the assessment questions. Thank you for listening the lecture.